Hello, my name is Reginald Bullock. I am the author of Father to Son, A Guide to Growing Up in a Difficult World. And what a difficult world it is and can be if you don't know where you're from. This next chapter, ethnic origin, is so significant and we don't even know it. If you don't know where you've been, how do you know where you're going? How do you know when you get there, right? And so who are we? Am I Reginald Bullock African American? I mean, me and my friends, we talk about it all the time. I'm African American. I'm African. Well, you know what? Ancestry.com and those types of DNA searches might differ with my thought and factually differ. So while I may call myself an African American, I may be a Irish, British, Scottish, Norwegian, Nairobian, Ethiopian American. Well, I was in the United States Air Force for almost 30 years, and I defended this country, and I honored the flag. So I'm definitely American. First and foremost, above anything else, I am an American. Every time I say I am an American, it reminds me of the code of conduct. The code of conduct in the military that we start off saying, I am an American, and then we go from there. And no matter who you are in the military, no matter what background or culture you are an American. But your ethnic origin is important because it defines your pride factor. I was raised knowing that, I come from slaves and we were less than dogs and we were property and we couldn't vote and we couldn't do this and we got beat by sticks and cops and they used water hoses to strip our skin off and they raped our people and hung us by the trees. That's my mindset as a kid growing up. That's my ethnic origin. I'm from a slave. Whereas some of my friends that were Italians, they walking around with rings and watches and yeah, what's up, yo, Tony? These are my friends. They didn't have that mindset that I had. They had a pride mindset. And my Irish friends, same thing. They just had that pride of being an Irish person because that's their ethnic origin. So this chapter tries to help the reader understand you have an ethnic origin and you have a proud heritage and you should be proud of that. No matter who you are, you're a human being. And there's really only one race of people, the human race. And when you can really boil it down to who you really are, and maybe even sprinkle a little bit of what's your purpose in there, you'll have the pride you need to navigate through some tough times. But you do have an ethnic origin. My children are both Native American. I said Native American, right? Duh. My daughter would beg to differ. She's an indigenous people, the first people before America was America. So she took this particular part of the chapter without knowing it, intentionally, even further. Ethnic origin, talk to my daughter, Shanae Bullock. I can't pronounce all her other names, her Native American names, but she definitely knows who she is, and you should too. Enjoy the chapter.
Chapter 17, Ethnic Origin. The subject of ethnic origin, minorities, prejudice, color, race, etc., has been and always will be a problem. I have had to deal with this subject my entire life, and so will you. I've tried to answer the question, why, and have come up with an answer that has satisfied me for over 14 years. The question, why is why the way it is? The answer, because that is the way it is and always will be. I have listened to idealistic speeches and promises time after time, and none of them have solved the problem, nor will they ever. I have watched program after program instituted to solve the problem of race, prejudice, etc., and they seem to get replaced with something else, because the initial one did not work. As long as there remains one person with opposing views, the problem will never be solved. The military was one of the most racist environments I have ever experienced. Depending on the prevailing ethnic group, that group would determine the ethnic tone of the section. If it were predominantly black, then the black ethnic group would dominate the language spoken, the music played, the attitudes, and the sports the base supported. If the group were predominantly white or Mexican, then that group's traits and environmental history would be the dominating factor. The new rules and regulations did not stop the thugs from acting like thugs. It did not stop the rednecks from acting like rednecks. It did not stop the good old boy network from operating and promoting the ones it wanted to promote. It just gave the game a new twist. As we used to say in my old neighborhood, you can take the boy out of the streets, but you can't take the streets out of the boy. Although I can step in and out of various environments, I will always remember what I learned from the streets. So that saying is true in my case. Even in many areas where fair and equitable treatment was supposed to be the prevailing factor, like making rank through the promotional system, receiving awards and decorations for outstanding service, and even receiving local recognition for outstanding performance, discrimination was obvious. I can recall too often when I consistently came in second place for various competitions in the Air Force. Even my white counterparts who observed the competition and some who competed against me told me something was wrong. Although no one would openly admit it, discrimination was the reason for my consistent second-place position. For some reason, the decision-makers just could not bring themselves to allow a black to be superior. Although there were many times when I came in first place for various monthly, quarterly, and yearly awards, to include even winning 2 honor graduate awards, I was, in most cases, the only black to receive the recognition. This was a very strange feeling when I was among my peers. The whites were very angry at me because I was black, and the blacks were angry because they thought I did something underhanded, brown-nosed, to get the recognition. After receiving this cold shoulder type of treatment, I began doing a little research to find out if, in fact, the military was discriminating against blacks. I began tuning into reality with a different level of awareness, and the reality was all around me. There were no black generals at the base. There were no black senior non-commissioned officers out of the entire aircraft section, and there was not one black commander anywhere for me to ask questions. This is a strange feeling. I even began looking at the list of award recipients for the years past. The names, with the exception of mine, were all white. I started analyzing the high-level award recipients and positions received from that day forward, and it was a clear signal to me that something was wrong. Even some of my white friends admitted to the racial discrimination they witnessed. After learning how significant the racial discrimination was, I decided to do something about correcting it. I joined the Rod and Gun Club, which was 100% white, and was supposed to see how accepted I was. Although this club was clearly a group of rednecks doing their thing, they had nothing personal against me. They accepted me into the club with all the rights and privileges afforded to anyone who wanted to join. They taught me how to shoot skeet and trap and a few other events. This led me to believe that they were not 100% at fault as I had believed. The problem here was that no blacks had ever applied to join the club. Although they remained rednecks and kept their good old boy attitude, they did not treat me like a boy. They gave me the respect I deserved and commanded as a man. The bottom line is that you are who you are, and that is just the way it is. Nevertheless, that does not give anyone the right to disgrace and discriminate against you simply because of your color or ethnic origin. Because a person is different does not make him any better or worse than you are. Because traditionally blacks were slaves does not mean it was right. Equally, because blacks were enslaved by whites long ago does not mean you should hold the whites of present day accountable for what happened in the past. Wrong is wrong. We are all different, and we should all be afforded the same opportunities to achieve and succeed in this world, based on your own initiatives. You cannot expect people to change simply because you want them to, nor should you change simply because someone else wants you to. Be yourself. Now, there are some obvious things that occurred which has tipped the scale in the favor of the whites. Having plantations, which could be handed down from generation to generation, is a very good start. As a matter of fact, in 200 years' time, posterity has numbered into the hundreds, which means lots of potential millionaires. It also means that all the close friends of the plantation owners and their heirs would be equally positioned to be comfortable. If my great-great-great-grandfather owned one half of a state, perhaps life would have turned out different for me. If my mother and all of my aunts and uncles owned 40 acres and a mule, then I am sure life would have been different for me. If congressmen, senators, governors, mayors, etc. do not have to give up their seat every year, then it is no wonder it took so long for blacks and other minorities to get a few crumbs from the pie. General Electric, Ford, McDonnell Douglas, Boeing, DuPont, and many more still have the largest shares of that pie, and their families were not black. Look at the percentage of blacks in Congress, or the percentage of blacks you see on television sitting in the press section during press conferences. It is very obvious that we are underrepresented. And let us not forget the presidency. It seems that every time a president appoints someone black into a position of power, it's a big deal. Why? I will bet that when there is finally a black president, everyone will be making such a big deal of it. He will not be able to do his job properly. Look at South Africa. It is evolutionally and biologically impossible for a person with white skin to evolve in that much sun. Yet, it seems like a big deal for them to have a black president. That is the way it should be. South Africa should be ruled by someone of a dark complexion. The bottom line is that blacks are finally being allowed to come to the starting block of the race after the race has already been going on. If you were to run a 50-mile race and found out everyone had begun running before you even got out of bed that morning, you would say that is not fair. If by the time you get to the starting block of the race, you heard that the closest person to you is already at the 20-mile marker, you would be discouraged. This is reality, and that is just the way it is. You can sit there complaining about how impossible it will be for you to win the race, or you can start running as fast as you can. It is very obvious from that scenario that you have no chance of winning the race, but through education, through knowledge, and through vision, you will see things that never were and say, why not? Why not run in the race anyway? You may not win, but you can finish. If you never finish the first race, how can you win the second, third, and so forth? This is the way you have to deal with the adversities and strikes that are already against you. You have to get into the race and run. What has happened in the past cannot be changed. However, you can change the course of the future. Just by finishing one race, you pave the way for more runners to be there at the beginning. Hank Aaron, Jesse Jackson, Arsenio Hall, Joseph E. Marshall Jr., Muhammad Ali, Crispus Attucks, Frederick Douglass, Richard Pryor, Martin Luther King Jr., Thurgood Marshall, Booker T. Washington, James Brown, Denzel Washington, Aretha Franklin, Huey Newton, Sharon Pratt Dixon, Andrew Young, Maya Angelou, James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, Brian Gumbel, James Earl Jones, Louis Armstrong, Oprah Winfrey, Benjamin S. Carson Sr., M.D., Judge Calvin T. Wilson, Calvin T. Wilson II, M.D., Branford Marsalis, Ed Bradley, Rosa Parks, Prince, Michael Jackson, Will Smith, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Quincy Jones, Michael Jordan, Jim Brown, Red Fox, Eddie Murphy, Marion Van Peebles, Walter Payton, Joe Louis, Malcolm X, Henry Austin, Spike Lee, General Benjamin O. Davis Sr. and Jr., General Colin L. Powell, William Bullock, Mary E. Bullock, Clement Bullock, Sam Bullock, Solomon H. Bullock, Johnny Bullock, Calvin Bullock, Priscilla Bullock, Annie Bullock, Eunice Bullock, Josephine Bullock, Jean Bullock, Martha Bullock, Jessie Bullock, Maud Bullock, Mary M. Bullock, Clara Bullock, and millions more have paved the way for new runners. It is your duty and your responsibility to continue the race. Either you will pave the way for the next generation, or you will win the race. This is how you should deal with the subject of race as it relates to your achieving whatever it is you are capable of achieving. I talked about it in the chapter on struggles. I talked about it in the chapter on games. I talked about it in the chapter on education. You have to beat the odds. In relation to your specific ethnic origin, all I can say is learn all you can. Although I am strongly against race discrimination, I feel that racial ethnic pride is necessary. You need to know where you came from. You need to know the history of your ancestors. You need to know what have become common words like picnic mean. You need to understand the atrocities of slavery. It is all necessary for your development as a person. It is said, those who do not learn from their past are doomed to repeat it. If you take a close look at our class structure, you will see that there are many people repeating the past. Why? Because they did not learn from it. We, as a people, need to learn to live together no matter what color, race, religion, creed, or ethnic origin we are. Although this world will never accomplish that task as a whole, you can, as an individual, judge people by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. If their content reveals a racist bigot, then that is how you deal with them. If they reveal a good heart and an open mind, then that is the level you should reciprocate at. I have friends from all sorts of ethnic origins. I have friends in England, Saudi Arabia, Spain, Germany, Switzerland, New Zealand, Australia, India, Egypt, South America, Canada, Italy, Israel, Bangladesh, Turkey, Africa, and other countries, and we get along fine. I have white friends who have treated me better than some of the black people that have betrayed me. It is the character of a person which should be judged, not their group. If you judge a person by their group, you are no better than the ones who discriminate against you. Although I have been and continue to be discriminated against by whites, I cannot allow myself to formulate an opinion which brings me right down to their level. Although I have been and continue to go into stores which have only white Barbie dolls for sale by the hundreds and no other ethnic dolls, I cannot allow myself to hate all the merchants. Although I have worked for a company and have seen others celebrate every holiday the card companies tell them to celebrate, yet Black History Month goes totally unnoticed, I cannot hold that against my coworkers. Although I am familiar with the many burnings of African Americans as a Sunday after church activity and allowed by local and state governments where the burned body parts were auctioned in fun, I still cannot hold all white people accountable for the actions of their relatives. It takes a strong man to be able to stand up against all the odds and achieve what he is capable of achieving. It takes a strong man to be able to feel the flame of the fire and the sting of the whip and not cry out for help from the oppressor. It takes a strong man to redefine the barriers that have kept people from progressing. It takes strength to see and understand how to deal with the problems that you will face all of your life because of your ethnic origin. Through strength, you will find the solution to the many problems that have yet to confront you because of your ethnic origin. Never forget, you are not alone. Never forget, millions have helped to clear the path so that you may win the race.